Yo, what's going on, YouTube, and welcome to Goal Line Hockey. It's Kevin Forte, and today we have a great video topic for you guys. Should we start planning the Cup Parade in Toronto? The Toronto Maple Leafs made some interesting moves this offseason, but is it enough for them to finally go over the edge and finally get a championship back in Toronto? We're going to discuss that today. So the first thing I think we have to discuss is, before we talk about is the team better or worse than they were going into the playoffs this past season, well, what changes have they made? So just to look at some of the subtractions to the Leafs since they last played a hockey game, no longer on the roster will we see guys like Michael Bunting. We are no longer going to see guys, excuse me, some of those additions they made at the trade deadline. Ryan O'Reilly, Noel Acciari, those guys will not be returning to Toronto. But they made a couple of key additions that actually look like it's going to make this team better. So looking at some of the bigger additions that the Maple Leafs made, obviously the biggest one on the board being Tyler Bertuzzi, the 28-year-old winger, played with the Boston Bruins at the end of last season. Now he's the type of player that the Maple Leafs probably got because of a little bit of luck, but honestly, that's a perfect fit here. Tyler Bertuzzi, down the stretch with the Bruins, was a really good addition to that team. And yeah, things didn't work out for the Bruins, but he still put up 16 points in 21 games. And he also put up 10 points in the 7-game first round series against the Panthers. So it's not like Bertuzzi was the problem there. He was well above a point per game player in that first round matchup. And all his seasons before that in Detroit, he's also been a very productive player as well. Obviously, his big season was the 2021-22 season where he put up 62 points in 68 games for 30 goals in only 70 games that season. So just to put it into context, this is a guy that, if playing a full 82-game schedule, would have been on pace for a 50-goal season that year. Now, the other thing that we have to look at here is this is this something that's going to put them over the edge? Tyler Bertuzzi alone probably doesn't put them over the edge. It's definitely a nice addition, and I would say an upgrade over someone like Michael Bunting, who was kind of in that slot. So you replace Michael Bunting for Tyler Bertuzzi, I think 1-for-1. That's definitely a win for the Leafs. Now let's go further down the lineup. So unfortunately, they were not able to replace Ryan O'Reilly. Ryan O'Reilly ends up going to the Nashville Predators, and he's no longer part of the team. So Max Domi comes in. Now Max Domi comes in also on a 1-year deal, 28 years old, same thing. He also has a modified no trade clause. So what's interesting about Domi, obviously his dad, right, was Ty Domi, played with the Toronto Maple Leafs back in the day. And his numbers are a little bit more peculiar than Bertuzzi. So during his regular season with the Blackhawks, he played 60 games. He picked up 49 points in those 60 games with the Hawks. But in his time in Dallas after the trade deadline, things didn't go necessarily as well, only putting up 2 goals for 7 points in the final 20 games of that season. Now, during the playoffs, though, with the Stars, he did play quite well. They ended up going to the Western Conference Final. We know how that all went. They ended up getting 13 points in 19 games out of Ty Domi. I'm going to do that a lot today, I think. Max Domi. And Domi in the playoffs is actually a pretty good performer. So this is a guy that it makes sense here for the Leafs. A guy that's going to fit in pretty well. And the other thing, we're going to see one of those infamous World Junior guys meeting up with his former teammate, as Max Domi and Mitch Marner were line mates back in the day in the OHL with the London Knights. So there's a little bit of a connection there. Now, who are some other guys they brought in here? Dylan Gambrell and Pontus Olmberg. Some decent additions, but nothing crazy on the board here. Again, those are 2 guys that are just going to help out the bottom 6. You have Kalle Järnkrok and David Kampf coming back. You also have Matty Nyes coming in once again, so hopefully he'll be back up and healthy for next season. And of course, Ryan Reaves. They signed Reaves to a 3-year deal, $1.35 million per season. I like that contract a lot. I think it's a good deal here for both the Maple Leafs and for Reeves. He gets a little bit of security there. It's a 35 plus contract as he's 36 years old, so keep that in mind. But I don't think there's going to be any need for buyouts or anything like that. But again, it is a 3-year deal, so that is something to watch for on a cap strained team like the Maple Leafs. Just something to think about, but I don't think that's going to be an issue. But I figured I'd mention it here. So the defense looks a little bit different as well. So Luke Schenn ends up going with Ryan O'Reilly down to Nashville. So that now means there's a hole in that top 4, and that's where John Klingberg comes in. He signed a 1-year deal, a little over $4 million. The 30-year-old defenseman, a great right shot defenseman here. The Leafs have a decent amount of right shot defensemen now with TJ Brodie, Jake McCabe, who can play both sides, Timothy Liljegren, Connor Timmins, and now John Klingberg. So a couple of really nice additions there for the Leafs. Klingberg is more of a puck-moving defenseman, which I think alongside Morgan Rielly gives a little bit more flexibility, right? Because TJ Brodie, McCabe, Timmins, and Giordano, they're all big defensemen. So, not to say Luke Schenn, of course they would have liked to have kept Luke Schenn, but John Klingberg is more of that quarterback that can jump on the second power play if need be. It makes a lot of sense there. I like that move there by the Leafs. And then in between the pipes, it stays the same. Matt Murray, Joseph Woll, and Ilya Samsonov. Now, we don't know what's going to happen there. He is still an RFA with arbitration rights at the making of this video, so we aren't necessarily sure exactly what's going to happen there, but we still have a little bit of time to figure that out. So with that out of the way, now that we talked about all that, what do you guys think of the Maple Leafs here? Is this a team that's better than they were going into the playoffs last year? Now, I do want to throw out the caveat that between now and the trade deadline, a lot's going to happen for the Maple Leafs probably. Hopefully in a good way, right? Making more additions at the deadline to try and push for a cup in 2024. That's obviously the ideal scenario, and that's the expectations in Toronto. But, you look at that team right now, they're kind of depleted with draft picks. They've got this year's first-round pick. They don't even have a first-round pick in 2025, and they don't have a second-round pick for this year, next year, or 2026. So they are lacking in the draft pick department, especially in the first 2 rounds of the next 3 drafts. So for the Maple Leafs, the expectation is this is going to be their team. They're actually above the projected cap spent, and once Jake Muzzin, who else is on the LTIR? Actually, it is just Jake Muzzin. So Jake Muzzin and Nick Robertson are the only guys on either the LTIR or the IR, which means that the Leafs' cap flexibility is still in question. But again, once that LTIR from Jake Muzzin kicks in, they will be okay. But this is a team that's definitely going all in for it once again. And in my opinion, I think they are better than they were last year. Yeah, Ryan O'Reilly, Noel Acciari, great players in their own right. But I got to be honest, I think Ryan O'Reilly's a little bit overrated. He's a good player in the locker room, but Ryan Reeves is also a good player in the locker room for a lot less money. And that's my opinion there. I think overall, yes, their center core did get weaker in the sense that not having O'Reilly there versus having him there, but you've added a lot more character and a blend to this team, bringing in some of the players that they did, like Max Domi, Reeves, and Tyler Bertuzzi. And that was the theme of the offseason for the Leafs. Of course, other than John Klingberg, they got bigger, they got nastier, and come playoff time, and Ryan Reeves said this in his interview with TSN after he signed with the Leafs, yeah, he's obviously overly confident and things like that. That is Ryan Reeves. But that's the kind of confidence that I think needs to come into that Leafs locker room, right? A lot of guys that don't want to rock the boat, that don't want to say the wrong thing there in Toronto. Honestly, Reeves could be kind of seen as a guy that, the media kind of is drawn to, which diverts some of the attention and kind of distracts away from guys like Tavares and Nylander and Marner and Matthews, and it kind of lightens up the locker room while also adding that physical nature. And I think Reeves is the type of guy that is a perfect fit there. He really, really is. And like I said, then you throw Tyler Bertuzzi, who we've seen the highlights of him, right? He has no problem taking one of his opponent's stick and throwing it in the bench, just being a distraction, being a pest, being a nuisance. And boy, if there's a first-round series against the Leafs and the Bruins next year, I am all for it. Tyler Bertuzzi playing the team he left in free agency, also playing Marchand and the guys there in Boston. Oh, that would be incredible. But I think that Tyler Bertuzzi and Reeves in particular, excuse me, are really good fits for this team. Now, Noel Acciari. I would say Noel Acciari's replacement here would be a guy like Max Domi. So I think that, again, when you're considering all things here, yes, this is a team that looks a little different, but when you consider the fact that he can play center, is Domi, that's a good way to kind of look at this too. And I think that's, when you look at this team, they had so many big defensemen, right, with Luke Schenn in there. Now you add that blend of offense with now Riley and Klingberg. And then up front, it was all about speed and skill. And now you're seeing that idea of, all right, now we're actually a little bit more about, adding that little bit of grit and size with the guys that I already mentioned. Now, the Leafs did make a couple of other moves for the American team, the American Hockey League team, but nothing too crazy. I'm just trying to take a look. There's nobody that I actually notice here. Artur Akitamov, who is a goalie prospect. Maxime Lajoie, I think they brought him back. William Legason. Those are all the guys that I think are new. And I don't think they really added anybody up front. So that's what we're looking at for the Leafs. Overall, I think they are better than they were. And like I said, by the time we get to the trade deadline next year, I think they're actually going to be even better. But let me know what you guys think down below. Are you guys planning the Cup Parade for the Leafs? Are you going to fall for that false narrative here in July? Because that's always the saying, right? Teams that win on the draft floor or win in free agency don't necessarily win when the puck drops. So I want to hear what you guys think down below. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.